Well, hello. I hope 2023 is treating you well so far. And this is the time of year when I start thinking about a new annual project. This jacket here that I'm wearing is my 2022 annual project, and I call this one 52 Scumbles. So, what's a scumble, you ask? Well, a scumble is a piece of freeform knitting or crochet that grows out in all directions at the same time. You don't create it row by row like you do typically with knitting and crochet. Things just kind of grow quite organically. And I was inspired by this book that I've had in my collection for a very, very long time. A long, long time ago, I had intended to make a jacket just like the one in the book and decided it would take way too long. So, a 1 year long project seemed like a good way to do that. My, my jacket, as you can see, is not quite finished yet. And the reason for that is that I have misplaced two of the scumbles. No doubt they are somewhere in my house and hopefully will turn up at some point so I can add them in. But right now, I'd like to tell you about what I'm planning to do for 2023. As I mentioned, my 2022 project was inspired by one of the books on my bookshelf. And I don't know about you, but do you remember back in the olden days before the internet, where if you wanted to see beautiful inspirational pictures of art, you had to actually buy a book? Well, I have quite a large collection of art books, so I thought I would do a deep dive into them this year, decide which ones I want to keep and which ones I don't need to have in my house anymore, and create art from them. So this week's art is inspired by these two books that I pulled off my bookshelf. The first one is a little calligraphy manual put out by the Sheaffer Pen company that I think came along with a set of calligraphy tools. The other thing that I've pulled out is What It Is by Lynda Barry. Lynda Barry is a cartoonist and she has a very distinctive style, as you can see here. And this book is part graphic novel, visual storybook, part activity book. And you can see it's got all kinds of great illustrations and collage. So in addition to my books, I've also pulled out a yellow legal pad because Lynda Barry likes to do a lot of her illustrations on these yellow legal pads that are kind of a holdover from the last century. I've also pulled out some calligraphy tools and some random scrap paper that I literally did pull out of the bin just today. We'll see how I use it. I also have these scented inks that I bought when I visited Versailles several years ago. Because if you visit Versailles, wouldn't you think you would need to buy a completely extravagant and unnecessary souvenir? And I decided that I'm going to create a beautiful cover page for my project for the year. But it turned out it's not as easy as you might think to just pull out your calligraphy tools that you haven't used for years and whip off a beautifully scribed page for your book. And yeah, I found that out. Anyway, so it took me a few tries. So my third attempt, I decided to start with the border, forgetting that I'm left-handed. And if I put a border on the left-hand side of the page, then my hand is going to be resting in it while I create the rest of the page. Anyway, I worked with that, got a little bit further along, added a bunch more details, and then I decided that one was no good too. And then on my fourth attempt, I didn't get very far on that one. Take 5. This time I decided that I was going to start with some collage. That seemed like a good plan. Commit to what's going on. And yeah, this one didn't work either. And then my battery died. So I decided to do some reflection and think about that. And I thought, well, maybe what's going on is I'm thinking about this the wrong way. What I'm doing is I'm thinking that I need to create the finished artwork. What I should do is create the components of the artwork and then put them together at the end. So I started over, charged my battery, started over, and started just doodling different things that were going to go onto my final page and did various versions of it. Here I am, on my arty bookshelf, writing that out multiple times to see which one I like the best. Practice, if you will, because practice is always a good thing. As you can see here, you can write for quite a long time from one dip in the ink. And this 52, the number 52 here, what I'm doing is I'm creating it by stippling around the numbers rather than making the numbers solid. I'm creating a textured and colored area around the numbers there, which is called the negative space. And stippling is an art technique. It's not particularly fast. Really what I'm doing here is whenever I'm not sure what to do next, I'm adding more dots around the 52 and just thinking about what I want to do next. And here I've decided that I'm going to do a little bit of collage. So I've cut out the numbers 2023. One of the things that's interesting to me, although I've created them in completely different ways, the numbers 52 and the 2023 look quite similar to each other. I guess it's just sort of the way that my brain creates numbers. So I tried them out on that red page, but I don't know if that's where they're going to go. And this is the part where I realized that I've left out a certain word there, in. So I add that onto my page as well. So my plan now is to cut out all of those elements that I've created and glue them, collage them onto my page for this week. And I've got this little accordion full book that I've made here. I've got several long sheets of paper and I'm going to add to this over the year. And I'm just thinking about composition. Where am I going to put my numbers? Are going to go near the bottom, and good thing they fit. That works. I've cut out some of the other elements and I'm going to lay them down and see where they go. Know that 3 is not going to stay up there. It's just sort of slid up there for now. Cut out a few other words, just making sure that those fit on my page. And I think that I forgot about the in again. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm going to use this Yes paste, which is kind of like glue stick in a tub, and it's really sticky. And the way that I use it is I use a palette knife and I butter it onto the back of my paper, and then I stick that into the book, and it's super sticky. It's really fun to use, but not cheap to buy, so I use it quite sparingly, but it actually does seem to stick a lot better than a glue stick. I haven't had any Yes paste glued things come up. And now I'm thinking about what it is that I'm going to do next. Oh, some of those bits that I fished out of the bin that didn't end up used for that other collage that I didn't end up using. I've glued those down, and now I'm going back in and adding some borders with my dip pen straight onto the page, and hoping that this goes well, because this is going to be the final version no matter what happens to it. So adding a border, and I decided to outline the numbers here so that they show up a little bit better. I enjoy creating these sort of repeating shapes and patterns. That's just quite restful. I'm bouncing around back and forth. I don't really plan this too much when I'm not sure what to do. I work on another area. I'm adding more detail to that strip along the bottom there. Just adding some little circles along that strip of paper. I think that was a little strip of map, and I found there were words on it and I found them distracting, so I decided to cover them up with little circles, because the words, I think it said Atlantic Ocean, and it didn't have anything to do with my piece, so I didn't really feel like it was adding anything, so I covered it up a little bit. I de-emphasized it by putting those circles on there. Just thinking as I go along, what do I want to do next? Not thinking about the overall composition. This really, I'm trying to be as intuitive as I can. Oh, and here I remembered that I've forgotten that word. And I don't actually have any formal calligraphy here, even though I got out the book. I'm using the calligraphy pen, so I decided to add the word in a fancy Gothic-like script. And somewhere along the line, even though I was being really careful, I ended up blobbing ink onto my page. So I decided to add more circles to disguise the fact that I had a couple of drips there, because If you do something accidentally, if you do it again, it becomes a design element and not a mistake. Now I'm gluing more strips of paper on. Little bits of paper here and there wherever there's empty space. I'm kind of a maximalist that way. I like my art to have lots going on. And this was not really planned. It was not what I intended at the beginning. I didn't really think about it, but this piece ended up having a rather defined color scheme. So it's got a lot of greens, blues, and purples going on. Now I've got out some more tools. These are my gel pens. And the fun thing about gel pens is that you can use a light color gel pen and go over a dark color. Now I'm kind of tying in the 52 with my color scheme that I've realized that I have going on. I'm using a light blue gel pen for the 5, and then I'm using a green gel pen for the 2. And that's another thing about these gel pens is they have fun metallic colors. So I'm adding some little dots on top of the word things with my gold gel pen, because I noticed that on the cover of Lynda Barry's book, she had added little dots on some of the words on the front of her book. And that's it. Here's my finished page. So what do you think? Are you interested in seeing more of what I do this year, inspired by the books on my arty bookshelf? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you again soon.